6. 11 a.m. Saturday, December 31st, 2022. Asuna stood in Shiyaya, a small village on the northern side of the 5th floor Vinecrad. It was a non-code village, meaning the anti-criminal code did not work here, but Asuna was in a state of utter relaxation. Without her sword equipped, without her armor on, without a stitch of clothing in fact, she could do without fear because Shiyaya was an instanced map that allowed only party members within its borders. And the reason she was not wearing clothes was that she was submerged to her shoulders in bathwater. She stretched out her arms and legs as far as they would go. The water temperature was a bit on the lukewarm side, but the floating bubbles and fragment fruit of herbs filled her nose, and pleasing scent that permeated her core was pleasant and warm. Not only that, but the bath was quite large, not as big as the great bathing chamber of Yulfil Castle, but the granite bathtub could easily fit at least 10 at once. It was clear that the Dark Elves truly loved their baths. I wonder if the Forest Elf village has baths this big, she speculated idly, trailing her fingers in the water. Her answer came from a short distance away. Not so, apparently. The Forest Elves have a tiny baths, but their food's supposed to be phenomenal. That was Argo, the rat, floating freely on the surface of the water. Naturally, she wasn't wearing her trademark short hooded cape, but even in the bath, those whiskers on her cheeks didn't wash off. Oh, I happen to think the Dark Elf food is quite good on its own, Asuna remarked, but Argo only chuckled without changing position. They bring out feasts like they came out of a 3-star restaurant, but after experiencing this bath, I'd have to say that I personally prefer the Dark Elf side. Thanks for letting me into your party, A-chan. She looked up to the left, but instead of the usual 2 HP bars, there were now 3. Don't be silly. I wanted to thank you properly, Argo, for camping out in the catacombs for an entire day to nail down the boss's attack patterns. Not at all. Not at all. I didn't do much. In fact, I should apologize for letting you and Keyboy worry about me. And I hear you got yourselves into a bit of trouble when you came looking for me. The events of the 2 days prior returned to Asuna's mind in vivid detail, and she felt her face grow hot. It's not red, right? If it is, I can always blame that on the bath. She glanced over to her right, where the floating information broker chuckled in an all-seeing delight. Asuna lowered herself down to her nose and blew bubbles in the water to hide her embarrassment. After Kirito's rescue in the 3rd level of the catacombs 2 nights ago, Asuna resumed activities with him. He had been on the search for Argo, after all. Once she had regained her composure, fortunately, they found Argo less than an hour after that. But the reason she couldn't be reached by messages was not as nearly ominous as they imagined. Argo was camping out in a small safe room in the front of the area's boss chamber at the end of the dungeon. It turned out the boss's name and appearance were totally different from the beta. At first, she was planning to mark the location of the chamber, then go back to town to put out the first issue. But when she noticed the boss was entirely different, she figured that she might as well collect some info while she was there. A process that was harder than she expected and ended up taking an entire day. The boss was an enormous zombie, far too large to have been a human in life. Heavily resistant to slashes, thrusts, and piercing damage. But by manipulating levers scattered around the chamber and solving a stone puzzle in the ceiling, sunlight could be let through to weaken the boss, assuming it was daytime, of course. Argo ran into trouble solving the puzzle, and at one point was basically just trying combinations out for sheer trial and error. Thanks to that, the boss was defeated handily by a chosen group of top players on the 13th. But Asuna still didn't rest easy during the fight, not just due to the openly competitive DKB and ALS, but even more so due to the reliance on Argo's information as a whole, and the dangers that Argo was putting herself through to get that intel. It wasn't polite to comment too heavily on others' playstyle, but there wouldn't be a better opportunity, so Asuna pulled her head out of the water and hesitantly asked, Argo? What is it? the girl replied, sitting upright and at Asana's serious tone. It was thanks to you that your work that we were able to beat the Catacombs boss that easy. I'm very grateful for that. But I think it's too dangerous for you to be collecting data on an unfamiliar boss all by yourself. Based on her experience at an all-girls school, Asana knew that offering what might be seen as patronizing advice could easily blow up in her face. But Argo maintained a slight smile, prodding her to continue. Feeling emboldened, she chose her words carefully. I used to spend lots of time in the labyrinth alone, but I can't really act blameless here. But your information is helping not just the top players like us, but also the mid-level players who left the town in beginnings later on. It's such a help that if something happened to you, it could completely stop us from proceeding the game. Therefore, actually, just speaking for myself, I'm worried that you might be putting yourself through too much, as a friend. They were difficult words for her to tell a friend in the real world. Ironically, it took being trapped in a virtual world for her to finally speak her mind like that. She was half expecting Arno to be upset by this, but the rat's whiskers only rose in a smile. Perhaps it was just the echo of the bath, but her voice seemed louder than usual, and she said, Thanks, A-chan! Those big eyes of her, usually hidden behind the long brown curls, stared at Asuna full in the face. When she continued, she spoke slower than her usual rapid-fire pace. It makes me happy that you're so concerned for my sake. To be honest, I was wondering if my stakeout was pushing it a little bit, too. But I got a duty to continue risking danger to provide information. Because you're an info dealer? Nope, Argo said, drops flying as she shook her head. Because I'm a beta tester! She had sense for herself that this might be true. Kirito seemed to believe it as well, but it was the first time she'd heard Argo admit it out loud. Asuna was taken aback briefly before she followed up with, But even if that's the case, it doesn't explain why you need to take on that dangerous role by yourself. Kirito's a fellow beta tester, and he takes part in the frontline group's raid parties for all the floor bosses. You could join us as a support scout, Argo. I don't like how long the cloying that frontline group term is. I think the Frontrunners is a much cooler name. Argo chuckled to break the mood, then poked at a banana-like fruit floating in front of her. The reason you're so worried about me is because I play a non-combat build, am I right? Well, yes, Asa admitted. Whenever she met Argo out in the field, she was equipped with minimalist armor and combat claws, but her skill lineup and proficiency couldn't possibly be suited for battle. If she focused on hiding, search, and eavesdropping, she wouldn't be able to spend much time on weapon skills. She was most likely sacrificing match HP and other stats to raise her agility as much as possible. She could dart her way around wimpy monsters, but that raised the danger of scouting a boss who held a variety of attacks. Argo smirked again, sensing Asuna's concern, and picked up a floating bundle of herbs to toss at the other girl. Asuna caught it by reflex. Then Argo grabbed the banana and stood up with a forceful splash. Proof is what we need, not arguments. Wanna try it, A-chan? Argo challenged, emerging onto the side of the granite bath. Asuna stared at her with a baffled, Try what? A duel, of course. Well, I guess that's a bit dramatic. A little sword fight, let's call it. She descended the open washing station, twirling the banana deftly in her hand. So Argo meant for them to have a mock duel. She with the banana and Asuna with the herbs. She was willing to accept the challenge, but the problem was that both Argo and Asuna weren't geared up with a single item. It was already embarrassing enough to be bathing together, but having a play fight, she wasn't sure that she could concentrate properly. Can I wear a swimsuit? Asuna asked. The information broker was taken aback, then looked down at her avatar, and her cheeks puffed out. Listen, I'm here bathing with minimal assets I've got, so how can you be ashamed when you've got much better? That's not the issue. Well, fine. And I want you to wear a swimsuit too, Argo. Huh? I don't have a swimsuit. Then I'll make you one right now. After a brief demonstration, Asuna's tailoring skill, the two faced off in a bath of Shiyaya village. Asuna was wearing a simple white one-piece. Argo was wearing, upon her own request, a yellow tankini. Asuna swung the bundle of herbs in her hand, idly wondering how in the world they'd come to this point. Her weapon was 3 fairly thick stalks about 2 feet long, which made it a surprising firm. It couldn't be compared to an actual rapier, but that wasn't the point. And besides, Argo had what looked like a banana. So, what are the rules? How about whoever whaps the other one first wins? Got it, Asuna said, pulling her left foot back in a stance. Argo, however, was standing still, arms dangling at her sides. Okay, whenever you're ready. With an invitation like that, it was hard to get into a spirit, but she wasn't going to make light of an honest competition. She glanced to her side, surveying the area. The bathing chamber was about 30 by 25 feet. On the right of the tub, lowered down onto the floor, and on the left wall was a line of wooden chairs. The floor was polished granite and appeared very slippery where it was wet. It would be difficult for Argo to take advantage of her footwork here. It would turn into a flat-footed jab fight, Asuna thought, and then she realized how much her brain had switched into combat mode. She took a deep breath. All right, here I go! Asuna took a sharp stride forward with her right foot. Poof! Argo disappeared, leaving only a puff of white steam behind. She's fast. Faster than any monster Asuna had fought before. Even the strongest elite mob she'd ever faced, the Forest Elven Hollowed Knight, hadn't even been able to move faster than Asuna's eye could follow, but Argo was so quick that it seemed that she had teleported. The only reason Asuna was still able to raise her left hand and lean to the right was her sense of hearing. She caught a single footstep hitting the water on the left side. A yellow blur grazed Asuna's side, passing behind her, producing a tiny little smacking sound. Ka! Did it hit? Asuna jumped as high as she could, spinning around in midair. She slid her feet backwards when she landed, taking advantage of the slippery floor to create extra distance between them. As she took position with a bundle of herbs in front of her, Asuna saw on the other side of the bathroom Argo twirling a banana in her hand, left hand on her waist. That was really good, A-chan. I figured I was going to win in one go, but that was more of a little smack than a whap. So the fight continues? Asuna asked. The broker gave her a toothy grin. In a sense, the display of light speed movement served the purpose of a duel in the first place. But being startled and letting it end would be a waste of Argo's invitation. Huh? What am I... For a brief moment, she realized that she was thinking something strange, so she cast that thought aside to concentrate. She couldn't keep up with Argo's speed, but the speed alone was not at all was to the fighting. The experience in the catacombs was so terrifying that she never wanted to think about it again, but it also taught her something very valuable. Battle wasn't just something that happened between you and your opponent. It also inevitably involved the surroundings. When Asuna fell through the trapdoor, when she used the shroom to recover her rapier, it had been the surroundings that had dictated the circumstances. In fact, the only way she had dodged Argo's swipe was that the water on the floor telling her the direction. Just with the rapier, she could take that extra step and utilize her surroundings to take her advantage. Without taking her eye off the distant Argo, she confirmed the state of the arena. They switched spots so that the bath was now on her left side. She began to inch towards it, sliding the soles of her feet over the wet floor. There was no extruding lip of boundary between the sunken bath and the floor on the washing area. The water continually flowed up and out onto the floor, so it was hard to tell where the surface of the bath started. As she kept inching her way sideways, keeping the tip of the herbs pointed carefully at Argo, Asana's toes eventually found the corner of the bath. But she didn't stop there. She continued sliding a further 6 inches to the left. Asana's left foot was completely off the floor, touching the surface of the bathwater. All her weight was supported on her right foot, in a pose that made it look easier than it actually was. It was impossible to pose to keep in a real-life world, but the muscle fatigue that handled differently in here, any action that exceeded one's strength stat, carrying items that went over the weight capacity or trying to lift very heavy rocks, would cause a hidden fatigue parameter to rise. When that number reached its peak, the player's limbs or entire body would enter a weakened, stunned state. But it didn't necessarily show until that point, which made it hard to gauge when a player was attempting more than that they can handle. Based on how her right leg felt, Asana guessed that she could keep her left leg steady there for another 10 seconds. She waited for Argo to move. The steam gathering at the ceiling formed a large drop of water that fell and dripped onto the floor. Once again, white steam billowed from Argo's feet. This time, she charged straight forward, not to the side. It was so fast that if she'd been standing normally, there would be no chance to react. Asana tried to intercept Argo with the herbs, but her opponent simply slipped past the tip of Asana's side. Suddenly, the yellow slim swimsuit tilted to the left. Argo's right foot sank through the water. That was Asana's trap, resetting her foot on the bath to make it look like she was standing on firm ground. As she hoped, Argo stepped off the bathroom floor, plunging her leg into the bath. Got her. She lowered the bundle into the sinking Argo. It wasn't a sword skill, of course, but it would be enough to whap her helpless opponent. But instead of sinking down to the bath, Argo's body reacted unnaturally. One of the leaves at the end of the herb bundle softly brushed the shoulder string of the tankini. Asana lost her balance and toppled as she turned Argo's momentum. As she landed at the bottom, at the lip of the bath, Asana could not believe her eyes. Argo was running on top of the water. Before her right foot started to sink, she pushed off the water with her left, and before that one sank, she pushed off again with her right. She got through 4 steps across the water, splashing uproariously before plunging face first into and eventually rising out. The sight of the information agent laughing heartedly with her face poking out of the water was somehow extremely funny to Asana. She snorted and joined in. After a good dozen seconds of laughing, they both got to their feet. Argo walked through the water normally to get out this time and tossed the banana into the bath. She stretched luxuriously. Well, that was fun. I guess we'll say that each other got in a smack and call it a draw. Yeah, of course. Asuna agreed, dropping her herbs into the water. After watching the ripples spread across the bath, she looked up at Argo and asked, what? Was that some kind of skill effect, the way you ran across the water? Well, Argo started, tugging on her wet curls and rolling her eyes. Normally, I'd charge you for that info, but I don't mind. It's not a skill. It's just a lot of hard training. Remember how I used those floater sandals on the river of the 4th floor? Yes. I had a lot of fun with those. I ran all over with them. By the time I was good at it, I went into the water without them on. Well, I sank in, of course, but the first step I stayed on the water. Remember trying that as a kid at the pool? The theory is that as long as your other foot moves while the first one hasn't sunk, it's like you're running on water. Maybe I did try that. Well, when it occurred to me that maybe it's possible here, I couldn't hold back. Since then, I've been practicing it in rivers and baths until I was able to take about 4 steps. I guess you might call it an unofficial skill. Asuna wasn't sure whether to be impressed or exasperated by this. Eventually, she decided to ask, Do you think I could do that? I don't know. I was able to do it, so it's not that the game doesn't permit it, but it might be hard unless you put all your points into agility and have a lightweight avatar like mine. With your ample endowments, they're not ample, she shouted, crossing her arms in front of her. Argo hissed with laughter and again opened her window. She removed the yellow swimsuit and sent Asuna a trade window. Thanks for the suit. You can have it back. No, take it as payment for the info. You're sure? Well, thanks. Argo canceled the trade and Asuna removed her own suit. She sank her chilly body back into the bath and exhaled. Once every last cell of her body was relaxing in the crystal clear water, a thought floated to the surface of her mind like a bubble. I was enjoying that duel. Well, they were using a banana and a bundle of herbs and never officially challenged each other, so it couldn't be called a duel, but they were two players competing in a fight, and at the very least, partway through, Asuna had been 100% serious about trying to land a good hit on Argo, and Asuna didn't shrink away. She enjoyed the excitement of the challenge. Did you have a lot of experience dueling, Argo? She asked, looking over to see the mousy brown curls swish sideways. Not really, and definitely not since the retail game started. Well, you seem very used to it to me. Is that so? Given the trick you came up with on the spot, you seem a lot more comfortable in battle than me, A-chan. You tricked me good. Asuna hunched her neck, embarrassed by the mention of her impromptu one-legged bath boundary ruse. That was just a spur-of-the-moment idea. I'm not complaining. It was a really good trick. Mind if I copy that one? Please do. I insist. Thanks. Well, I ought to pay for that idea, Argo offered, grinning widely. Before Asuna could reply, she abruptly asked, Are you afraid of dueling, A-chan? Only a truly talented gleaner of information could have seen through Asuna's issue of eating away at her heart. Yes, if you can even say that. I only tried it once, here on this floor with Kirito. In fact, I couldn't even officially start the duel. The countdown ended, and we were facing each other with our weapons, and my body just refused to listen to my commands. Despite being in a warm bath up to her shoulders, she felt a chill trace her back in thinking about that moment. She clutched herself with both hands, trying to explain what was going through her mind at the same time. It wasn't that I was afraid of Kirito. He was very serious, but not in a threatening way. I was the one who asked him for PvP tips, and the duel was first strike mode, but I was still terrified, and it made me horrified to think of moving onward. She lowered her mouth into the water and let out a sigh. The bubbles popped under her nose, filling her nostrils with citrus scent. I'm not saying I don't understand that feeling, but a silly sword fight game and a real duel are different things. Even a first strike duel, you're losing HP, Argo offered. Asuna nodded and lifted her face out of the water and turned to the other girl. To get back to the topic, when you go on your solo recon missions, you can do that because of your incredible speed you showed me just now, right? You can handle dangerous dungeon on your own, having the confidence to evade any attack that comes your way. Is that what you were trying to tell me with this duel? When you put it that way, I sure sound full of myself. The broker chuckled, shrugging. But I'll admit, that part of me knows I need to. I can sprint out of there. I just got to be more careful about where I'm stepping from now on. She winked at Asuna, who grimaced and asked, But having extreme AGI means a low HP, and you can't equip tough armor to protect you, right? Don't you worry about that? What would happen if you take an unlucky heavy hit from a monster to get immobilized by a trap? I do worry about that, of course, the Route said, smiling in a way that was more transparent than her usual smirk. I'm scared of losing HP. You can't just respawn like an old-eyed crad. If I was thinking about survival and nothing else, I'd join a big guild and put all my points into strength to be a tank. In fact, maybe never leaving the town of beginnings would be smarter an option. But I happen to place a bit higher priority on what I'm doing now rather than sheer survival. Because you're a beta tester? True, but not just that. Argo grinned and winked again. Sorry, but any more than this will cost ya. Still, in thanks for inviting me to this incredible bath, I'll give you one piece of intel on the house. Okay. Earlier you said that I didn't need to do this dangerous reconnaissance alone, that I could do like Keyboy and join the frontline gang. Asuna noted, and Argo held up an index finger, waving it back and forth. But I think the reason Keyboy doesn't brave the dangers of solo adventuring isn't because this way is more safe. Then why? Ain't it obvious? Argo fingered and moved through the air to gently poke at Asuna's collarbone. Because he's got you.